there, you awakening wonders. Thanks for watching Stay Free with Russell Brand. Wherever you're watching, the whole show will only be available on Rumble. It's Friday, which is the best day of the week because we every Friday have an in-depth conversation with free thinkers, radicals, disruptors, campaigners, and philosophers. Today, I'll be speaking with Calley Means.
We're being lied to.
A whistleblower and activist who exposes corruption in big food and pharma.
What's happening where 15% of kids have fatty liver disease, 25% of kids have prediabetes or diabetes. We're being brought to our knees.
When we had him on the show before, just for a guest for 20 minutes, our video went viral.
These are simple metabolic things where we're biologically just destroying ourselves.
Then the medical system now is the largest and the fastest growing industry in the United States, which is just staggering to wrap your head around.
Today, he'll be talking to us about the use of fear to weaponize the pharmaceutical industry.
If you change your diet and you commit to 150 minutes of getting your heart rate up, you will feel something.
And once we click over to being exclusively on Rumble, I'm going to be talking to Calley about a story that I can't even begin to describe to you. It's so obscure, corrupt, and unusual. I can only talk about it on Rumble. I don't even want to bring up the subject on YouTube because I can't even personally make sense of it. And I'm going to let Calley Means handle the potential legislative fallout by explaining it himself. Please, let's welcome to the show Calley Means. Stay free with Russell Brand. See it first on Rumble. Thanks for joining us again, Calley.
It's so great to be here, Russell, and see you after your domination of America, which was awesome to watch.
Thank you. I'm very excited that you and your sister are going to join us at our community event in July in Hay-on-Wye. You spoke about her last time and said that she's a great inspiration to you and an incredible influence on your career. Two of you, in essence, are now sort of anti-big food campaigners. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's come about?
Yeah, so we grew up in D.C., and I'm actually back in D.C. Just met with members of Congress, which is why I'm a little overdressed. But we grew up good young conservatives, trusting the medical system, saying how great the American food system was. And, I went into politics. My sister was the pride of the family. She did the right thing. She was president of her Stanford class, an undergrad. She was top of her class, Stanford Med School. And then she was a surgeon, an absolutely crushing residency. And she had an out-of-body experience. She was looking over a patient 6 years into residency and cutting open, she was a head and neck surgeon, cutting open their sinuses. And she realized that patient was under her knife 6 months before. And she realized that she had no idea why that patient had this recurring inflammation. And she actually, as one of the most credentialed, educated, accomplished surgeons in the country, did not know why the patients under her knife were sick. And tying that back, Stanford Med School, Harvard Med School, top med schools in this country, more than 50% of their money touches pharma somehow. And what does that get them? 90% of doctors today graduate in America without a single nutrition class. Casey graduated from Stanford Med School without learning one nutrition class. Over 80% of her curriculum was in pharmacology. And she did a very brave thing, and she abruptly quit. And where it ties to me, Russell, is we had a pretty common experience. Our mom was our best friend, our hero. And in 2021, she was taking a hike with my dad and had a pain in her stomach. She went into the doctor and she realized she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. We rushed to her side and she died 13 days later. And the doctors at Stanford Hospital told us how unlucky this pancreatic cancer, people are getting cancer at increasing rates, autoimmune conditions, dementia. It's all going up and it's all unlucky. And what we did was we unspooled pancreatic cancer. It's highly tied to prediabetes. My mom was one of 50% of Americans who has prediabetes or diabetes. It's highly correlated, many forms of cancer. Dementia, Alzheimer's is now called type 3 diabetes. And what my sister and I are really on the warpath is this simple thesis, which is that we're being lied to. What's happening where 15% of kids have fatty liver disease, 25% of kids have prediabetes or diabetes. We're being brought to our knees by these sicknesses and mental. And you can't say that what's going on with our body isn't going on in our brains. And it's so complicated. Everything's complicated. When my sister graduated med school, there was 42 medical specialties she could go into. The body's broken into 42 parts. There's one issue. There's one issue above all other, and we're feeding ourselves poison. Our kids are born where they want to move. They're being put on desks without sun. These are simple metabolic things where we're biologically just destroying ourselves. And we're really on the war path to try to simplify how we think about science, because as we're talking about, it's due to a very rigged system. We're confused due to a rigged system.
When you say something like we're being poisoned, Calley, that sounds incredibly incendiary. Sorry, I should pass on my sympathies about the story about your mother's pretty disturbing and stuff. But I wanted to say that that's a very provocative thing to say. Now, I know that big food spend a lot of money on lobbying, and it appears that the relationship between big food and big pharma is a mutually beneficial one, that the kind of food that we're eating is making us sick. But I don't want to be hysterical or reductive, maybe too late for that now, but because I'd like to be reassured, Calley, that you have plain evidence that we're eating food that is bad for us, that is causing us diseases that are preventable, that there are substances in our food. In fact, that there is an overview around the type of diet that we should have that's irresponsible and it requires reevaluation. I know that this is your life's work, and in a sense, given your relationship with your sister, part of your family's dharma, but can you explain to me
Sure.
using actual examples how there is a sort of a kind of large-scale poisoning of the American people that's leading to preventable illnesses and death?
Yeah, I think it's really important. Let me to dive into specifics. Let me paint it this way. I'm also a new dad, and that's highly motivating to me. And let's just look at the pure economics of a sick child. Okay, so let's think about a 15-year-old lower income child, okay? And the dirty secret, and just from purely financially speaking, that child in America is an absolute gold mine, because that child probably has prediabetes, which is from ultra processed food, probably has obesity, probably has high cholesterol, probably has high blood pressure. This is very common, right? 15% of kids right now have fatty liver disease, which used to be only a disease you saw in elderly alcoholics. So that kid, right, and the US is on Medicaid, and Medicaid pays out. The budget is greater than the Defense Department. This is the healthcare for lower income folks. And a sick kid with chronic conditions, what does that mean? The kid's not going to die, but for the rest of their life, they need a statin for their cholesterol. They need metformin and insulin for their diabetes. They need inevitably Adderall, which 15% of kids are for their ADHD. They need Ambien because they're going to have sleep problems from all these issues. They're going to need opioids because they're going to be in chronic pain. They're going to inevitably have fertility issues. Male sperm count's down 50%, so they're going to need medication for that. They're inevitably going to have erectile dysfunction, which is just constrainment of the blood vessels, which is basically the same thing as heart disease. They're going to be on all these pills, right? And the medical system looks at that, we're treating that person, right? That's what's bankrupting the United States right now, far greater than defense, far greater than any other line item, is these people that get sick early and they're treated, okay? So the medical system looks at that and says, that kid is going to go to 6 different doctors. As I said, my sister, she didn't learn about the overall metabolic health of how ultra-processed food hurts our cells and shows up in all of those symptoms. She was a head and neck surgeon. She was going to devote her entire life to 1 square millimeter of the body, 1 square millimeter, which she was going to do a fellowship in. And that's all she was going to focus on. That's how you rise up in medicine. You segment the body. So this is very profitable. That child who's going to have a ton of comorbidities is very profitable. And there's a lot of incentives to make this complicated. There's a lot of incentives to send that kid to 6 different doctors, to a psychologist for that SSRI, to a neurologist for the ADHD medication, for the cardiologist for the heart disease. These are all the same thing. These are all the same thing. So are the doctors evil who are prescribing that statin? No, that's the system they're in. Although doctors are catching on to this. Doctors have the highest suicide rate and the highest burnout rate of any profession in the country. So I think they're getting in for the right reasons, but realizing patients aren't getting better. And Yeah, so on the food company, I think what food's doing is understandable. Food is trying to make food cheaper and more addictive. And there's three main ingredients that we've shifted our diet to. It's sugar, which is 100x more sugar we're eating than 100 years ago. Processed sugar, added sugar really wasn't a thing 100 years ago. That's a staple of our diet. Highly processed grains, which didn't exist until 1900, which is where you take the fiber off, it's shelf stable, no nutrition, and then because the fiber's out, it's a glucose bomb. And then this is important, seed oils. Seed oils are the top source of American fat right now. These were created by John Rockefeller in the early 1900s as an industrial byproduct from oil production. Not joking. Our main source of fat, when you look at the label, canola oil, soybean oil, this is an industrial byproduct that's much cheaper than good fats like olive oil, avocado oil, ghee, grass-fed butter, things like that. That's the staple of our diet. So this isn't a big mystery. We're eating inflammatory things. We're putting into our body, everything is tied to inflammation. As I talked to my sister, she's looking at that patient with inflammation. Inflammation usually was a good thing. It's the body coming to foreign things in the body. The problem in America right now is that 75% of our diet is ultra-processed fake food, which we were not biologically made to eat. Our body is reacting to foreign substances and causing all this disease. If you took out those three ingredients, sugar, seed oils, and highly processed grains, this is not hyperbolic. You would not have heart disease, which is the #1 killer. You would not have type 2 diabetes. You would actually eliminate, to a large degree, Alzheimer's, which is now called type 3 diabetes, many forms of cancer, infertility. All of these things relate to food, but there's profit, Russell, in complicating the issue.
Bloody hell. That's pretty heavy. I was thinking then, Calley, about how, like in sort of pre-civilized, as they were known, human cultures, we would totemize the plants that we required in order to survive, or the animals that we hunted in order to survive. They would be sacred and divine, and we would have a explicitly sacred, if such a thing is possible, relationship with them. We would worship and revere them. Now that we live in these vast monocultures where animals are slaughtered en masse, where crops are grown en masse and highly processed, we have become like the food that we eat. We are what we eat. We are a product. When you sort of spoke about that, a 15-year-old child as a sickly gold mine that could be latched onto, lashed up and profited from, I can see how we are being farmed, how we have become a type of commodity. And to hear that just with the removal of those three things, sugar, seed oil and highly processed grain, we could meaningfully alter the health of our populations, it seems to me that this is the type of legislation that should be immediately passed, that our farming practices ought to change immediately. That if government is good for anything, it's good for that. But because what you're describing is so radical, Calley, and because today you're meeting with people in Congress, and obviously I wouldn't expect you to tell me anything that's private, but what concerns me is that what we tend to accept are minor reforms, small victories, when what's clearly required here is a revolution. Those kind of interests with that kind of lobbying money, they're not going to go without a fight. That's serious power. You're saying that they spend more money than the defense industry, they're more profitable than the defense industry. Am I fudging that? Like, if so, that's a very powerful interest to go up against. How are we going to do it? What the hell are you doing in Congress? And in your view, what kind of legislation should be passed to all of this terrible, deadly trajectory?
No, you're absolutely right about that stat, Russell. And shockingly, and this just I can't even wrap my head around, healthcare is the largest and the fastest growing industry in the United States, producing worse outcomes. Usually innovation, I'm an entrepreneur in tech, usually innovation is lower cost, better outcomes. Healthcare is higher cost, worst outcomes. And it's growing, again, faster than any other industry. I think we gloss our eyes over at the rate of healthcare costs in the US, and this stats are said a lot, but it's going to be 40% of GDP in 15 years, and this is not slowing down. It truly is going to bankrupt our country, and we're becoming a non-competitive, infertile, fat, civilization. I mean, that is literally happening. So let's get down to the brass tacks. I think you make a great point. And my 2 points are this: there's definitely systemic issues, and let's talk about that right now. And then I think your viewers, and it's just amazing, a huge diversity of people are waking up and taking more personal empowerment, because it's got to be a bottoms-up revolution. But I want to make some points on the top down, because I think this is really important. A lot of people throw up their hands and say, well, it's hard to diet, it's hard to exercise. No. 25% of kids having prediabetes right now is hard. 45% of kids being overweight or obese is hard. 93% of Americans having metabolic dysfunction right now. This is hard. We are destroying our country due to metabolic dysfunction. And there's actually very simple things we can do. So number one, we need to realize that we are playing into the game. And I actually met with a bunch of Republicans today. And if you remember, the Republicans under Trump had an opportunity to put a proposal down to reform Obamacare, and they had nothing. The reality right now is that the left and the right is basically just talking about marginal improvements to the existing broken system. You are absolutely right. Everyone needs, and I will say, politicians, I think, are waking up to this. It's not about slightly altering Medicare Part D. It's not about going into page 300 in the Medicaid law. It is understanding that the problem with healthcare is that every single lever that touches our health profits off people being sick and loses money when they're healthy. The problem is healthcare is the most employed industry in the country, and everyone from a pharma company to a hospital to a medical school, they make more money when more people are sick, which is exactly what's happening. Even insurance companies, which people think should want to save money, actually now they can only take 15% profit margin, and by law in Obamacare can actually raise premiums to get that 15%. So they actually, since they're capped at 15%, want costs to grow, which is exactly what's happened in the past decade. All that's happened is people get sicker, costs grow, and insurance company revenues go up. So we have to realize that one fact. And it's interesting, a lot of members of Congress care about this issue. A lot of them want to go up against their lobbyists, but actually they don't even understand the simple fact. The problem is that incentive. So what can you do right now? A couple of quick things, Russell. The most shameful policy in America, in my opinion, the most shining example of corporate cronyism, really evil towards kids, is the fact that the USDA, the most influential health organization and food organization in the country, and I would probably the world, they recommend 10% added sugar for 2-year-olds and up. They, in the USDA federal nutrition guidelines, guide up to 10% added sugar for an American 2 years and up. To me, this is absolutely shameful. Sugar is a highly addictive drug. There's big differences between stronger drugs like heroin, but when you do brain imaging scans, the dopamine release is very similar to any other drug like that. And we're normalizing that, and the government is actually saying it's okay for two-year-olds, 10% of their diet to be added sugar. That could be changed tomorrow. But why is it that way? 95% of the folks in 2020 who made the nutritional guidelines, and now in 2025 in the administration for President Biden on the the updated nutrition guidelines, Dr. Fatima Stanford, who you've talked about, the Harvard obesity doctor who said obesity is genetic and not the result of food. You can't make this up, but she is literally on the nutrition guidelines, making guidelines not only for the US, but that impacts the world, saying sugar, inevitably she will not reduce the sugar. So the key point here, Russell, is that for better or worse, Americans listen to medical authorities. When the Surgeon General in the 1980s said smoking was bad, many years too late, the smoking plummeted. Philip Morris at the time was one of the 5 largest companies in the world when that Surgeon General's report came out. In the 1990s, we remember the food pyramid, which said, eat more carbs. Carb consumption went up 20% in America. That was disastrous. And then for better or worse, when Dr. Fauci told Americans to get the vaccine, I think it's close to 90% of people got one of the vaccines. People listen to what authorities say for better or worse. If sugar, there should be no guidance for sugar. We do not guide kids that they should have a certain range of cigarettes or alcohol. The only difference is that sugar, am I in a bizarre world? Are we not being brought to our knees by metabolic dysfunction caused primarily, chiefly by sugar? I don't think anyone even disagrees with that. So why the hell are we recommending that? And we can go into others, Russell. Just the one other thing I'd say, getting to the food stamp issue in Coke, when I worked for them, There is a systematic, like the cigarette companies, just a systematic rigging of the institution of trusts. Coke and processed food companies spend 11 times more nutritional research than the NIH. In the past 2 years, there was 50,000 nutrition studies done, peer-reviewed nutrition studies. Again, meeting with members of Congress today, they have lobbyists in their office every single day handing them a different study. The only goal of the studies is to confuse the congressman. And I'll just close with this one point here. You know, the policy solution is just to eliminate all nutrition studies. We are the only animal in the world that has systematic obesity, that has systematic depression, that has systematic diabetes, obesity, other metabolic issues. You don't have lions and giraffes in the wild. A wolf in the wild, right, or some kind of derivative of a dog in the wild has 0% obesity rate, close to 0% cancer rate. Domesticated dogs, which eat our own crap and the processed crap we make, have more than a 50% cancer rate. Okay, there's no animals except us. And the only difference between us and other animals is we have experts telling kids to sit in desks all day in sunless rooms, not moving when they're made to move, you know, learning from the teacher and eating processed crap. So I think there's going to be investigations into the research and the rigging of the institution of trust. And then I know we're going to talk about Ozempic. This is a pretty big deal because it's going to double the American Medicaid drug budget.
We cannot talk about Ozempic until we're exclusively on Rumble.
Okay, we got some good news there, so we'll wait for Rumble.
We will have to. So if you're watching this on YouTube now, there's a link in the description. You have to click over to watch this on Rumble because their commitment to free speech means that we can discuss anti-establishment, anti-corporate interest that simply cannot be discussed on YouTube. I was just thinking when you were speaking, Calley, that during the pandemic, I remember that Joe Rogan got into trouble for sort of saying we should be exercising and eating well. And that was treated as a sort of a controversial statement. And I'm thinking too of Terence McKenna's famous edict that the culture is not your friend. I think that listening to you is I've never really heard it so clearly demonstrated that the culture is set up to keep you distracted, keep you fed on bad food, governed by bad interests, consuming bad products and bad ideas continually, making you feel disenfranchised, lazy, lethargic, frankly, sick. We're being made to physically sick by the food that we eat. When you said that thing about sugar, that an awakened and conscious government, an awakened and conscious system would say, listen, we didn't know before, but we know now we shouldn't eat sugar. And I know you all love it, you poor bastards, because it's delicious and fantastic and you're addicted to it now. But we're going to have to say you shouldn't be eating it. And again, I'm not talking about banning it because I guess people are free. But certainly it should be made plain that you ought not be eating these foods. You certainly shouldn't have health bodies recommending certain amounts. And like you said, the way that this is perpetuated is because financial interests, in this case from big food, are able to create the framing and flood the space with studies that they pay for that obfuscate and confuse the reality, so that, you know, something like, I consider myself to be a relatively smart, switched on person. I still eat processed sugar. I literally put sugar in my tea and stuff. I let my kids eat chocolate, you know, like all day long. Those are, you know, I use it to palliate them and calm them. And I know that it's wrong. And I guess now at least I can, you know, as an individually free person, start to feed my children and myself differently. And I suppose at least, you know, continue to do what you're doing to convey this type of messaging openly. So at least people know that they've got the information.
Well, yeah, Russell, I mean, you know, just looking at the sign behind you, stay free. And I think that's the key thing. Freedom is great. And I'm a libertarian. I think we should not be banning cigarettes, not be banning alcohol, not be banning marijuana, not be banning sugar. But it's anti-freedom. It's just complete and utter rigging of the system and corruption to be paying. And if you add it up, the food stamps and the other government programs, school lunches, it's over $100 billion literally signing the bill for our own truly societal destruction. We are becoming a non-competitive society. Male sperm count is down 50% in a generation. Female infertility, PCOS, is skyrocketing. It's at 25% by some estimates of women. Our bodies, our core evolutionary functions are systematically breaking down, and it's very, very serious. Look at a public space in America where 80% of people are overweight or obese. I mean, this is not this is not marginal. And again, have a candy bar, put sugar in your tea. I'm not, I'm like anyone else. That shouldn't be subsidized, and we should treat it. I enjoy a beer once in a while, but treating that as some normal thing that we should, we have become gluttons. Like look at a store, look at a supermarket. Every single, I actually have done audits of this. If you go to a gas station or you go to where you buy food, every single item in eyesight has 2, usually 3 of those unholy trinity of ingredients I said. These are not things that we should be normally eating. So you brought up a couple of good points, and just one quick thing on the Joe Rogan thing, and I think this is important.